So my name is David Andre Lawrence Atcham, and I'm 73. And trust me, I have been around the block. I never thought of myself as being courageous or brave, but my adventurous spirit took me to places that no other 5 and 6-year-old boy would. I explored mountains. I climbed waterfalls. I went up monstrous trees. I saw wildlife up close and personal. And I can say it's industry. If I tried to describe those events, few would believe it. And I grew a strong sense of independence. And I had so much energy that I was lucky that I came from a sporting family and I was able to enjoy all the sporting games of childhood. And from the age of 19, I started surfing. And I got into water sports, diving and surfing, and snorkeling became a passion. I had a motorcycle that took me all over. I started traveling, and in those days, travel was so uncomplicated, man. You walk down to the marina, you walk along, you saw a guy working on his boat, you started a conversation, you asked him if he was heading out, and he would be, and you would say, well, can I work a passage to where you're going? Sure, for free. I went from Bridgetown to St. George's, Grenada, for free, and I worked on cleaning the deck and making meals, and it took us 2 days, and I get there, and I said, I have my backpack and my camping gear, and I tell the guy, I'm gone. He says, where you going, man? Stay on the boat. Beautiful yacht, And from Grenada, I started traveling like that, up the Grenadines and to, St. Lucia and St. Vincent and Martinique and Guadeloupe and Dominica. And I got as far as Jamaica. And it took 2 years. And I learned to make handicraft, macrame belts and bags and leather shoes and different things. And there weren't many people doing that in those days, And life was so cheap in those days. It's unbelievable. I mean, I'll give you an example. I had a motorcycle. It used to cost me 10 cents a gallon. I would fill that tank for $1.16. I mean, it was that cheap. And everything was cheap. Clothing was cheap. But then I met a really good friend, and we started smoking weed. And that was a introduction into something that had a tremendous impact on me because it allowed me to have space, inner space. It calmed me. It helped me to be more reflective and less anxious about things. But it also opened my eyes in ways that I had not considered before. Because one of the benefits of good quality weed is that it takes you to a height that allows perception to open up. You see better, you hear better, you taste better, and you think clearer. And the perceptions stay more meaningful. It's like you see below and beyond the immediate. And by 19, I realized I was not living a healthy lifestyle. I was on the treadmill and I wanted to get off. And I woke up one morning and I decided I was going to stop the world and step off. It was that or go crazy. And I didn't want to go crazy. So anyhow, by 20, I was based in Barbados and traveling the Caribbean. And then I got really homesick for my mother. I wanted to see my mother for Christmas. So I got rid of everything that I had in Barbados. I had a giveaway party and a going away party, and I sold some stuff that I couldn't take with me. And I went to the airport, and of course, I was a full-on hippie, man. Really, I was a sight to behold. And I get to the airport. I wasn't wearing shoes in those days. That was my shoeless period. And I get to the airport, and I go to check in, and the guy at the counter tells me, "Brother, they won't let you through immigration and onto the plane unless you buy shoes." So I said, "Well, is there a souvenir shop that I can buy a pair of sandals?" I'll never forget. I paid $8 million for a pair of what we used to call go forwards. You can only go forward. If you try to go back in the sandals, you left that there, you know. So anyhow, I bought the sandals. And this plane was coming to Trinidad via Tobago. So I get on the plane, and it arrives just before sunset. And I sat there, and it landed, and it taxied to the terminal. And there weren't many people coming off the plane. And a voice inside of me just said, "Move." And I ran out of the plane, and I stopped the guys who were just about to close the cargo hatch. And I jumped up on the carriage, and I said, "I just need to get that and that." And they said, "Go ahead." And, you know, which is very unusual. So I grabbed my stuff, and I ran into the terminal just in time, because the customs and immigration guys had dealt with the 3 or 4 people, and they were about to leave. And, and that's how I ended up in Tobago.
Gracious me.
And I'll never forget, I had about $800. Now, $800 in 1973 would be about the equivalent of about nearly $80,000 today. I mean, things, you didn't buy things in Tobago, you know. I went to the beach, I pull a seine, I get fish. I walk up the street, I see an avocado tree laden. I asked the owner if I could get an avocado. She says, "Sonny, if you can pick a bunch, you can have all that you want." Same with breadfruit, mangoes, pawpaws. Tobago was amazing. And then, of course, I was diving and snorkeling. And there was so much marine life just offshore. I mean, I used to I kid you not, I would wake up in the morning, do some yoga, walk up the beach, pull the seine, get 2 fish. I had no fridge or nothing. I'm living on the beach. I made a little bamboo hut, and I'm on the beach, and I have everything I need. And I walk down to the reef at lunchtime, and I'll dive out there, and in 20 minutes I got 2 lobsters. And I come back in, and I finish the next fish with lobster. And that's my dinner. And I'm done at eating at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock. And I just, you know, as soon as it gets dark, the sun goes down, I'm sleeping. I wake up at 4 in the morning, I do some yoga, and I lived that healthy life for about a year until my friends in Trinidad discovered what I was doing, and I got guests. Guests who didn't want to leave, you know. And then one day I was walking down the street and heading to the beach, and I saw a guy with 2 flat tires, poor fellow, and he was struggling. So I went to help him, and he was a Trinidadian guy, and it turned out he was the accountant at a brand new hotel that was just being built, and finished rather, you know. And we started talking about, you know, where you're from, what you do, and when I told him I had done accountancy for a couple of years, he says, "Would you like a job?" I said, "Well, let's talk about this job." So he took me for lunch at the hotel.
Which hotel was it?
Mountain Bay Hotel.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And it was then about 4 months old. And he took me to lunch. And of course, everybody in the hotel is looking at me, the employees, because I'm with the accountant, this hippie. Anyhow, I had been living on the beach now for months, right? And so he takes me to show me where I have an apartment for free. All my meals are free. The laundry is free. And then he tells me what he's going to pay me. And I'm like, "You're going to what?" And so I take this job, and I become the night manager. And I went to Trinidad to my cousin, who is a hairstylist, and I told him, Drew, I need a makeover. And so I walked in there, this hippie, and I walked out there, this yuppie. It was a fantastic carnival, one of the best carnivals of my life. Not just because of her, but there was these two entertainers that came on the scene that year, and their music started a genre that still existed today.
Oh, wow.
That was Mike Shadow.
Okay.
Okay? And the other guy was Ras Shorty, right? And they had different styles of a similar type of beat that became soca. They were the godfathers of soca.
Wow.
And the musicians of the day, the panists of the day, adopted, they loved it for the beat because it was faster than the traditional calypso, you know, and it was party music. And man, it was insane. I had the time of my life. And I actually got to meet Mick Jagger that carnival.
Gracious.
And, you know, in Barbados, I had already met David Bowie and his wife, you know. And, I mean, I was always meeting incredibly interesting people. So, eventually, I had the job. She came to Tobago. We hit it off. She went back to Montreal. I had even my girlfriend, who then informed me that I had planned to go on a trip, a surf trip, and I said, well, you know, why don't you take some vacation? Come with me. Because travel reveals, with a companion, really reveals what is going to work and what is not going to work. There's nothing like it. So anyhow, I'm sitting in this rocking chair, and I tell her this, and she says, well, that sounds like a really wonderful plan, but I have an appointment in September. And I said, well, there's always October, November, December. She says, no. I have this appointment that must be kept in September. And then she informed me that she was going to have a child. And being versed in accountancy and maths, I did the math. I realized, but what wonderful news. And our relationship took off from there. And then we had a daughter, and 2 years later we had a son. And they are my most precious, I wouldn't say things, they're the most precious aspects of my life. From the instant of their conception. Parenthood opened me up in ways I could never have anticipated. Because prior to them, I met the love of my life. And I interacted with, and friendships that I developed. And I have developed some extraordinary friendships in Tobago. And worldwide. Because I was a very good surfer. And I got a reputation. People would come to Tobago, and I would help them, and they would travel, and they would tell their friends, "You're going to Tobago, check out David." And so I'm known globally. I've been featured in magazines and videos and stuff. And then I got into selling what is my experience, which is local knowledge. If people would come to Tobago, they want to make a movie. Well, I knew where to go, who to go to, and how to get it done. And so for years I was in the movie business. And that broadened my horizons and took me into construction and project management. And I was lucky enough to do 3 of the biggest projects in Tobago. You know, the first modern 125-room hotel in 30 years in Tobago, which was the Grafton Hotel. And the last big project I did was changing these LPG, liquid petroleum gas tanks at the bond at National Petroleum to coordinate transporting and and leading the team that brought them from the factory in Mexico all the way to Tobago was unbelievable and incredibly demanding. But we had a team, of course, interpreters, and lawyers, contract managers and stuff. But my job was to get it and put it in. And I mean, it cost a lot of money. And but we pulled it off in the time frame we said we would pull it off. And I mean, I was there when the tanker came and started filling those tanks. It was wonderful. And that was my last big project.